Well, Emily, I'm having trouble. I should have known about this yesterday. I would have made notes. Because Emily and Billy were so much older, and they went off to Washington and got jobs. And they didn't stay there much after. And
Seems like everybody did that. Was that just the thing to do, to go to D.C. to get a job?
Well, especially during the war.
there wasn't much to do in Monroe unless you did something with the railroad.
Yeah.
And the little grocery store on a corner.
Mm-hmm.
And then they built a hotel there, so some of the workers could stay,
Mm-hmm.
and anybody could live there, of course, but they didn't have any place for men to stay that worked there.
Yeah.
So they, what else did they do? The town just grew and grew as long as they were working on the trains and employing a lot of people. The town just got bigger and bigger.
So Emily and Billy went to D.C.
Mhm.
Is that where they met their husbands?
Yeah.
And then, let's see, so then there was Uncle Jiggs. Did he go to D.C. too?
No, he stayed in Monroe and he did jobs. I have to think about that.
I don't remember what he
And then Aunt Jerry, of course, met Uncle Carlton, and he worked on the railroad. But was he in Monroe? Is that where she met him, in Monroe? On the railroad?
did. I would think.
I think so, but
They probably went to school together. Yeah.
yeah.
And
Well, we
then,
did have to go to high school in Madison. See, a school bus would take us there. It was about 7 miles.
okay.
So that was another community
Mm-hmm.
that we were involved in. And we made a lot of friends there because we didn't have that many friends in Monroe.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a small town.
And then you and Phoebe were the youngest, right?
Yeah.
But the thing that made Monroe the place it was is they used to repair steam engines. And they had this huge building where they could pull an engine in, a few of them at a time, and work on them. And then it would turn. It was a turntable, and then it would turn to get them back on the tracks. And once diesels came along, well, it just killed the town. And it's been a while since we drove through there, but of course, the grocery stores all boarded up, the motel is all boarded up. But there's still a lot of houses there. And a lot of people probably work in Lynchburg, or even it's not a bad trip from there to Charlottesville. So, you know, the rent's probably cheap, or the houses are cheap, and they got water and sewer and everything else you need there. So it's probably a good place for a lot of people who still live.
A couple of things happened though. We were small and we lived in this tin house. We called it a tin house because it had a tin roof. And it was noisy when it rained and everything. But Mama wanted to drive the car, and she didn't have anybody to teach her. So one day she just got in the old Ford and we got in with her. And she started driving and started going around the house. And we just kept going around and around the house. She didn't know how to stop the car. Finally it ran out of gas and we stopped. So that was a weird thing that happened. And another that happened that scared me after I heard about it. They used kerosene stoves, cooking things, and they had a glass full of kerosene sitting on the counter, and I went over and took a drink of it. I thought it was water, but fortunately I didn't get enough to do any damage.
Wow.
Afterwards I was scared to death, but I didn't realize what I was doing.
Did you burn your hand on the stove one time?
Yeah, I did that too.
Excuse me.
I just reached on the stove or something. I don't know why I did that.
How many different houses did you all live in when you were growing up?
We started living in a house that our grandparents lived in. And they got very, very old, and well, finally when they died, we moved in the house. And it was a nice big house for Monroe. And we were a big family, so we had a lot of space for bedrooms and everything. And they had outdoor bathrooms, potties. And we had a nice big one right in the backyard. And we had another house in the backyard. It was both sides of a garage that they let people stay there that worked for us.
Hmm.
We had a cook or somebody. And Mom did have some help. Because they had a lot of people, black people and people like us, that couldn't find jobs in a small town like that, so they worked in people's houses. So we had somebody working in a house most of the time.
So your dad must have made pretty good money.
He did. He did make pretty good money. We weren't wealthy, but we didn't have any trouble buying food and keeping ours going.
Did all you kids get along pretty well? From what you can remember?
Yeah, the only thing, he seems to be the only boy. He was a little more, I don't know, he argued with us a lot. He didn't appreciate things we did, and he had another opinion about everything. But for the most part, we got along pretty good. The girls all got along.
Mm-hmm.
And Phoebe and I were very close. We did everything together because we were the last two, and we were about 2 years apart.
Mm-hmm.
And Emily and Billy had gone, so Jerry and Phoebe and I and Jakes were the only ones left.
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember your mother because she was always fun and jolly and mischievous, and we just loved it when Grandma would come to visit.
She's a lot of fun.
Yep, definitely.
Well, a lot of people don't realize probably, but when they start drafting people, but Joe went in first. And well, as a matter of fact, back in '37, we opened a place in Front Royal. And Sam was running that, and he was just 17 years old.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, and had a big old warehouse over there and a scale inside the warehouse. They didn't buy cars, just bought all kinds of newspapers and small scrap items and stuff like that.
So why was he the one that ended up in Front Royal?
Well, Joe quit school in 11th grade to help Dad. And then when when they decided to open the place in Front Royal, Sam quit school too, so neither one of them graduated from high school. And then when the war came along, say Joe went in, then they drafted Sam, and then Irv, and so we had to close the place in Front Royal. It wasn't a huge place anyhow. So then I was the next one to go. Now Fritz was here all that time, incidentally, so she was living with Dad all that time and with us. And then after I went in, then Aaron tried to get a deferment because 4 of us were in, and they wouldn't give it to him. So he didn't want to go in the Army, so he joined the Navy when he was 17. And then left Fritz with Dad. And apparently they did okay because they always had a nice house to live in. They rented all the time, but I mean, from the time they came to Winchester, they always had a bathroom. And there were a lot of houses in Winchester that didn't have bathrooms back then. They had outhouses just like Jenny had. And so he went on in the service, and I think Dad had 2 or 3 people working for him back then. So when the war was over, and Aaron, I guess Aaron was the last one to come back, he went back to school.
Good.
Went back to school. I think they let him come back to the 10th grade. He played football for 2 years and then quit. He only went back to play football. He and Nicholas, and there were about 4 or 5 of them that did that, manual samples. They just wanted to play football.
So he didn't graduate either?
No, Aaron didn't graduate either. Irv, well, the girls, Betty and Yoma, and then Irv graduated, and I did, and then Fritz. But they were good businessmen. I mean, people didn't know they weren't high school graduates. Did well.
You see, being the youngest in the family, Phoebe and I, we didn't know all the other stuff that was going on between Billy and Emily and the family.
Once they moved.
It's almost like a different family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because they were away.
Yeah.
And with us, we were all there together. And of course it was, we kept a very kosher home. I mean, we had 3 sets of dishes, and during the regular meals, if we had meat, we used a separate set of dishes, and if we had dairy products, we had a separate set of dishes. You couldn't mix them. In other words, if we were eating meat and we had bread, we didn't have butter to put on it, because there was milchika and fleshika. Fleshika being meat, milchika being the milk product. And and then during Passover, for the 7 days of Passover, we packed both sets of dishes in boxes and took them up in the attic and brought the other set of dishes down. And that was tradition. And it was hard to do in Winchester because they didn't have a kosher meat market. And Novik's had started a transfer company back then, and somebody from his office would call the Jewish families and ask them what they needed, and then wherever they went to Richmond or Baltimore or DC, then they would call in. They knew the stores. They'd call in and say, "This is what we want to pick up." They'd pack it in hot ice and bring them back and give them to the families, and then we pay him for it.
That was nice.
But that was hard to do. The same way with chickens. They didn't kill chickens like her mama did. They had what they call a shaka, which was a guy that the only people that could do that and they would pluck the chicken's neck, get the feathers out of the way, and then take a razor, they had a razor that you shave with, hard, and then just cut the chicken, bleed it, and then you couldn't put it in water. You had to pluck the chickens dry.
Ew.
And I mean, every little cookie had to be off of there. It was a terrible job picking chickens.
You're making me hungry.
We dip it in boiling
Yeah,
hot water.
hot water, yeah.
And then the fellas came out
Right.
real easy.
Mm.
But then after Mama died, and it all went to pot.
Really? You didn't do kosher anymore?
Yeah, we couldn't do that anymore. So
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, it was. It really was a lot of work. But Mother never learned to read a newspaper. We used to get a Jewish paper from Baltimore, New York, or somewhere. They sent it through the mail to her. She read the Bible every day. And every day Dad would put on this, I used to know the name of it, they'd wrap around her arm and then have this little black thing that they put around her head. I thought I had that at one time.
Yarmulke?
No, it was the thing they wrapped around and it went around and up on his head, and that was some procedure he went through. He was an amazing man because he could speak Russian and German and Hebrew and Yiddish, and he understood gypsies. He could understand the gypsy thought. Never had a formal education, and yet his brother Baruch, who lived in Israel, he was here as a boy, young, and for some reason he went to Israel and got involved in the Zionist organization, which is a large Jewish organization, and he was one of the original founders of that particular organization. Very well educated. But Dad had a few brothers too that did well.
So
But,
how many houses did you all live in when you were growing up? Do you remember?
Well, from the time I remember South Kent Street, then North Avenue, and that was a brand new house we moved in on North Avenue,
Nice.
and that's between Loudon and Cameron Street. Yeah, Cameron Street. And from North Avenue, we moved to Fairmount Avenue in two different houses. The one house, brick house, the Semples used to live in. And then we moved from there to National Avenue. And Dad almost bought the house on National Avenue, but couldn't work it out with whoever owned it. Then we moved to Gray Avenue.
Why did y'all move so much?
Couldn't pay the damn rent. So, I really don't know. But they're always nice houses, always nice
But was each one a little bigger?
houses. Yeah, well, and then of course, by the time we moved on Gray Avenue, Neom and Betty had already gone. Betty left right after high school, so she left when she was 18 and went to work in D.C. somewhere. But she used to sing over the radio. Betty Coed.
And how far could that be heard, her singing show?
I'm not sure.
I mean, was it just in Winchester
Oh,
or
no,
was it in
no,
D.C.?
she was in D.C. area, yeah.
Huh. So she was famous.
Yeah, I got a lot of stories to tell. But when we lived on National Avenue, so the story goes, Abe was selling subscriptions to the Washington Post. And he came into Winchester going around. And he came to our house and he saw Betty's picture on the piano. And he asked Dad where she was. And I guess she was working in D.C., I'm assuming. And he said, I'm going to marry her. And he tracked her down and started dating her and ended up marrying her.
Love at first sight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then the final house, of course, was on Valley Avenue that Dad bought. He bought that in '41, so I was in high school then. And so it was a nice walk. Closest walk we ever had to Manly High School. Of course, Joe never lived there. He was already in service. And when he came back, well, he lived there for a while, but then he had a friend of his, Bob Baker, who lived along with his mother, and Joe moved in with them. Lived there until he married Nikki.
So none of y'all married Jewish girls?
The only one that Irv married Maddie Cave's daughter. Big mistake. And she had two daughters, and I can't even remember the name. The youngest one, she and Irv got together, and apparently did pretty good. And I remember they were getting married in Portsmouth or Norfolk somewhere. And the night of the wedding, we were all up in the hotel room, had a few drinks. I'll never forget this. And Earl said, you know, I really don't want to go through with this. He said, well, don't do it. Oh, I can't. All those people down there, et cetera, et cetera. He said, I've got to do it. And it's a big mistake as it turned out. It wasn't good. She was young. I guess she was probably just 18 at the time. But that's a whole nother story. You know, with 5 boys and a family of our size, and the different ones that got married, now with Jenny, with Billy, married, what was
Lloyd.
Lloyd. He worked for the post office, and he had, two children.
One.
That's right, he only had the one. And Robert and Emily never had any children. And of course Jerry had, 5, didn't she? 4 girls and a boy.
Tell that story.
Well, Robert worked for Carlton worked for the railroad. He was worked on switching trains. And it was Easter Sunday, and they all wanted to get back to their homes. And they used to go from Monroe to Charlottesville, switching cars. And apparently in one of the switches, Carlton didn't realize it, but when he jumped off the one car that he had stopped, he jumped right in front of the train that was going down. And it cut off an arm and a leg. They got him to the hospital, but it just couldn't stop the bleeding. So he literally, as I understand it, bled to death. So that left Jerry there with these 5 kids. And she got involved with some guy down there later on. And he was a philanthropist, is that what you call him? But they go to horse races and all that kind of stuff. And I think he used up most of the money she had. Well, she ended up in an institution. Anyhow, so there was left the kids there. So one day we had a tractor, but we didn't have a closed trailer, so we borrowed a closed trailer from this friend of ours. And Jenny and I drove down in the car and with a couple of the guys and to help load, and the tractor trailer driver and another guy. We drove down there and loaded all of her stuff up in that tractor trailer. And brought those kids back to Winchester to our house. Of course, you remember.
You remember it?
Yeah.
Remember the rest of the story. I don't remember how long they stayed with us. But we finally found them in the house on Piccadilly Street for ourselves.
So for a short time, there were, let's see, 5 and,
11 children.
see, I don't think Ann and I were born yet, or were we?
Oh yeah, because Mike was 6. Michael was the same age as Don. He was 6 years old when Carlton died. So he was the youngest one.
So you
Yeah.
had 11 kids in your house for a while.
And then Jerry came, after she got out, she came to live with us too. I don't know where we all slept. I don't know. Of course, we had finished the upstairs by then.
You have?
We had put the stairs in by then.
Do you remember, Phil, where everybody slept?
No, Steve and I were up in the attic, I guess.
We put a radiator up there, and then we had a fan in the one window. And our next door neighbor and I insulated it. It's laced. We had another guy that built the steps, and I said, "How are you going to do this?" And it was built into one room where the twin beds were. And he said, "Well, we had to come out here with a few steps and then go up the other." So it worked out just fine. Took part of a little closet away, I built sliding doors.
And this is at Monroe,
No, that's on Berryville Avenue.
on Winchester.
Yeah. Berryville
You
Avenue.
lost me a long time ago.
That was
So
a
then-
good house we
It's
had
got
on
better
Berryville
memory.
Avenue.
So we, the family grew up, you all grew up.
I haven't grown up yet.
You got married.
But yeah, that was a really good house on
Mhm.
Berryville Avenue.
Yeah,
And I decided, well, it's a good house, it's a big house. And we can just stay there and raise our family there. And then one Sunday, we'll get into that story. We were just out driving around and we saw this sign that said open house. And I think this is good for the camera, for you, why we moved out of Berryville Avenue. So we went in and here's this 5-bedroom, 3 full bath house. Big old basement, need room in the back of that. Big field in the backyard. It's just ideal for a family with 6 kids. And Jack Erlin, who I knew really well, was a realtor. And the builder was a fellow by the name of Harry Miller, who had not only built that house, but the one across the street. And he'd also built some houses on Walker Street. He was a part-time preacher. So Jack said, "Charlie, this is an ideal house for you. 6 kids." Yeah, nice house. Nice house, Jack. How much is it? This is 1966, and we're 42 years old with 6 kids. He said, $55,000. I laughed at it. He might have got Jack. There's no way we could work this out. He said, "Look, let me work on it." So about a week later, he came back. He said, "Mr. Miller will give you 17,000